Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Heather Moody and I'm out of HR. I'm just going to do a brief introduction and just to give everybody a little bit of an overview. This is something that came about through the Labor Management Forum, so it's considered to be a joint management and labor-sponsored session that we're putting on today. And so we have with us Paul Kowach, who's an EAP counselor, and he's contracted through the EAP. He was here a few weeks ago and he conducted a supervisory training session on the EAP as well. And this session is geared towards all employees. So without further ado, please welcome me and help welcome Paul Kowach, and he's going to be our presenter for the next hour. Thank you.
In Morgantown. Did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody. And I'm here to talk about the Employee Assistance Program. I'll give you a brief overview of my background. I've been in this business over 30 years. I think I stopped counting after that. I have 2 graduate degrees, one in human resources and the other one in clinical social work. In addition to being a licensed clinical social worker, I also teach part-time at the University of Pittsburgh and also at LaRoche College here in Pittsburgh. Teach graduate courses in HR and then also in social work, respectively. So, and next week the fun begins because I'll start teaching again. So, and then the traffic will increase, so we have to allow ourselves more time to get where we're going. So, anyway, with that being said, I'm going to actually get into the program and talk about the Employee Assistance Program. And how many of you have heard of the program before? Have you? Okay, so you've heard of it, but maybe not quite sure exactly what it does do. It is defined as a worksite-based confidential assessment, referral, and short-term consultative service, and that's for any personal problem that has a negative impact on work performance. But I always like to emphasize that it has a potential to impact work performance because my belief is the sooner individuals get some consultation and objective advice for a personal problem or a concern that they have, the better off they'll be in the long run. I believe the earlier the better, so I will emphasize that the potential to impact rather than wait until it gets to the point that it actually impacts work performance. And some questions for you. Everyone has personal concerns, obviously. Sure, if we didn't, then I don't know, then I'm not quite sure we would be human. Everybody has personal concerns throughout the lifespan, and they vary. It depends upon where you're at in the lifespan. If you have young kids, then obviously you may have concerns about child care, may have concerns about parenting, misbehavior, schoolwork, homework, so forth. Or when they're to the point they're getting ready to go to college, then people begin to wonder, well, where do I get the money to finance education if they already haven't saved, or if they've saved, that's sometimes not enough. And then how do I apply for loans, grants, all those sorts of things to what about the transition? How do I deal with an empty nest, so to speak? So there's all kind of concerns that we have at various phases of the life cycle. Another question, people think problems must be big before asking for help. Some people do, but there are those people that think that in order to seek help through the Employee Assistance Program, you might have to be clinically depressed, or you might have something that fits the criteria for ICD-9 or 10 or DSM, which are sort of the nomenclature that we use in the fields for medical as well as mental health diagnosis. But no, we encourage people before it gets to that point to certainly seek some assistance, to ask for some advice. And whether it be a parenting concern or something of that nature, or just a situational problem that I'll talk about in a minute. Assistance is a phone call or a click away. Yes, absolutely. So there's a 24/7 number that I'll go over here shortly, and also a website that I'll also review with you where assistance is available. And help is confidential. Yes, definitely within the limits of the law, and I'll go over some of the exceptions, which are exceptions for anybody in all 50 states when it comes to exceptions to confidentiality, and those have to do certainly with risk to oneself or other people. What the EAP does provide is in-person assessments. So first and foremost, to dealing with any issue or any personal problem is sitting down with the individual, setting up an appointment, trying to get an understanding of what their problem is, what they might have done to take care of the problem, what's worked, what's not worked, and certainly to come up with a problem as to how to resolve, or a plan, I should say, to how to resolve the problem. And it does provide coaching and consulting as well, and then referrals to community resources. So one of the reasons that Magellan contracts with people such as myself is we live in the area, we know the area, we're experts at knowing the resources and what's provided in the area, and so linkage with community resources in the community where one lives is vital and important to getting assistance. There's certainly legal and financial services available, and I'll talk about that. Group services, 24/7 telephone support, and certainly a lot of resources on the website. These are some of the more typical problems that the Employee Assistance Program deals with. Certainly troubled relationships, and that could be with a partner, a spouse, it could be with a child, and even teenagers, believe it or not. Many of us, I don't know how many people have teenagers out there, but I've heard it referred to when I was studying the various stages of the life cycle in graduate school, the storm and stress period, so which it certainly can be. See what you have to look forward to, Heather? No, I'm not trying to paint a bleak picture. Parenting is a great thing. Emotional reactions and regulation. Sometimes people have difficulty with their emotions. They can get to the point where it's difficult to control, and so we can help with that. Stress, well, we all have stress, but it's how we manage stress. If there's anybody that doesn't have stress, then let me know. Then we can get together and we can bottle it or sell it and make billions of dollars, but we all have stress, but it's how we manage it. And too much stress certainly can be overwhelming and tax our coping skills and abilities. Anxiety. Anxiety is essentially when people have concern, worry. Well, we all worry and have some concern to some extent because that's what gets us up in the morning, gets us to work, gets us to pay the bills and that sort of thing. But sometimes anxiety can get to the point where we can't turn it off. We just think about it 24/7. And some people who have anxiety problems tell me, and one of the main symptoms is they go to bed at night and their mind races and can't turn it off, and that's not a good thing. Therefore, it affects sleep, and they get up the next day and they're not rested, and so anxiety can get to that point. Depression. Well, we're talking about, we can help with people that have maybe some down periods in their life that might have a couple of days of being down, but we can also help people with situations where they might be depressed and feel sad for extensive periods of time, 3-4 weeks, maybe months at a time. So we can help with that. Grief, we all go through grief, whether it be certainly loss of a relationship or loss of somebody significant to us, or sometimes people experience loss of jobs. Sometimes people go through grief when they're in the empty nest syndrome. Their kids go off to college and they're trying to adjust to the kids being away, and so that can be difficult. So we can help people with those kinds of situational circumstances. We encourage people to get some guidance and support when they're going through grief so it doesn't lead to complicated grief and then lead into depression. And then workplace problems. Probably one of the biggest workplace issues we deal with, or I've seen in recent years, is really interpersonal difficulties in the workplace, how people get along with one another, how they work with one another, and sometimes they may need to meet with us to really get some guidance on how to deal with those kinds of issues. There's a whole host of other problems that are too numerous to mention here, but certainly we would encourage people to certainly, if there's any doubt, seek assistance through the EAP. Alcohol and drug abuse certainly is a problem we see a lot of, whether it be the individual themselves, it might be a family member, or it could be someone who grew up in a family environment where alcohol was present or other substances on the part of the parent or perhaps both parents. And so the biggest issue we seem to have in our country, according to NIAAA, National Institute of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse, is that of binge drinking. And when you think about binge drinking, and you think about segments of the population that might engage in that, looking back on your college days, what do you think is the biggest group of people that might engage in binge drinking? College students, undergrads in particular. And NIAAA defines binge drinking for men as 5 or more drinks on one occasion, for women 4 or more drinks on one occasion. And so that's a significant problem that we tend to have in our country. Not to say that people don't have issues with dependency or ongoing abuse, but certainly it is a big issue that we have. Parenting concerns, I alluded to having certainly when we have children, there are different phases of the life cycle, there are different stages of their development, and with each stage of development there can be some challenges. And so whether it be the terrible twos or adolescence, there are certainly challenges, and we can certainly help with that. And then the sandwich generation issues. How many of you know what, you've heard the term sandwich generation before? And that is essentially individuals dealing with raising their children still, but also dealing with parents or elderly parents who are certainly needing some assistance. It's certainly a concern in our area. Allegheny County, which is the county in which Pittsburgh is located, has the second highest percentage of elderly people in the country. There are those people that feel that when it comes to summer, we have the highest percentage when all the snowbirds come back from Florida. Given that we see a lot of people that have issues in dealing with elderly parents and helping them, and so that's more and more an issue. And certainly as we see people such as myself, the baby boomers aging, we'll certainly see more of that. But that is essentially when you're kind of caught in the middle dealing with still raising your children, but also helping parents, that can be extremely stressful. And people often look for resources and need guidance as far as where to turn with those types of challenges. What can you expect when you contact the Employee Assistance Program? Well, people such as myself are all master's level or above clinicians. We all are licensed in our respective disciplines, and that could be a psychologist, a social worker, it could be a counselor, or a marriage and family therapist. So we're all licensed in our disciplines in our respective states. Some of us have additional certifications, and so that's typically who you'd be meeting with. We encourage in-person meetings, face-to-face meetings, so that the counselor can sit down and conduct an assessment, really clarify the problem, because oftentimes what the person comes to us for may be just a symptom of the underlying problem, or they may have multiple problems. For example, somebody who is having financial difficulties, and let's say they're married or in a relationship, could be having some conflict related to the finances. And we often see one of the top issues that couples argue about is money. And so they could be dealing with multiple issues. It could somebody who has a problem with substances, or there's a substance abuse problem in the family, could be having multiple problems. Oftentimes financial problems accompany those, marital problems, and so we really clarify the problem or the problems and then identify the options for resolving the problem or problems, and then agree and develop a plan with the individual as to how to resolve that problem. It could be a couple as well coming to us. It could also be a family coming to us. So we develop the plan and agree upon a plan of action. And sometimes that plan of action might involve referral to an appropriate resource if needed. If somebody does come through the Employee Assistance Program, does get some assistance, and they decide they like to continue with us beyond the EAP sessions, and we would be a provider in their health insurance network, then certainly they can continue to see us under those circumstances. They would just need to sign what's called a waiver that says you were given the option to be referred elsewhere, but it was your preference and your choice to stay with us. And that, a lot of times people prefer that because, you know, the most frequent comment I hear is that, well, I've told you my problems, I feel comfortable with you, and you mean I have to go somewhere else? And so many people prefer to stay with us after they've already met with us through the employee assistance benefit. And we do like to follow up with everybody to make sure they're continuing to work on their issues, or the issue is getting better, or if we refer them to another resource. Number one, have they actually linked with the resource, and we will often, and I'll talk about this in a minute, link the individual with the resource and with the appropriate releases signed. But we like to make sure that they've got an appointment, they're comfortable with the counselor that they might be meeting with, or wherever they might have been referred, and that they're getting the assistance they need that they initially came to us for. So we do follow up with everybody. As far as confidentiality, which I alluded to early on, they are private, voluntary discussions. If we were to link somebody with an appropriate resource, then we would obtain a written authorization to do so. And many people prefer that we help do that so that can sort through the red tape, and we can help facilitate the transition to that particular resource. So we do get the written authorization to do that if they would like us to do that. In any reports that are given to the agency, certainly there are no individuals identified. It's aggregate data, and it gives statistics on the utilization of the program, and that's typical for all EAPs. And then confidentiality is observed in accordance with federal and state laws. The exceptions to confidentiality are one is if somebody poses serious harm to themselves or someone else, then we are required by law to take appropriate precautions to protect them. There have been a number of Supreme Court decisions in a number of states regarding that, and our responsibility to follow through with the appropriate assistance. Certainly, the other exception would be if we suspect that there's child abuse or neglect. We're required by law to report that, and there have been many, many updates regarding that law in most states now because of scandal, as we all know, that happened a couple years ago here in Pennsylvania. And then the other exception would be if we suspect that there's elder abuse or neglect. And so that unfortunately happens as well. If someone suspects an elderly person is being abused or neglected, then we have to take appropriate precautions to protect that individual. So those are the exceptions, and that is the case for even if you were going to your medical doctor. Those are the exceptions to confidentiality that are required by people who are licensed and who are assisting individuals. So, any questions about that? Sometimes there are questions, but I want to make sure that that's clear for everybody. There are also legal and financial resources available through the Employee Assistance Program. You do have the connection, telephonic connection for legal and financial advice, and if somebody requests it, there can be referral to an in-person attorney that can help with various things such as will preparation. So, how many of you have kids, children? How many of you have a will? Okay. If you don't, I'd strongly advise it. Do you really want the state making a decision for you as far as who is going to take care of your kids if they're underage, and who's going to manage your resources and all that sort of thing? If you don't make the decision, the state's going to make it for you. It's something that oftentimes people don't think about, but I would highly advise. And so how do you truly know that the state's going to respect and honor your wishes if you don't have anything that's written down that talks about what your wishes were? You may have talked about it verbally with somebody, but, so there are a lot of concerns and challenges there. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. It's, I think, very important thing that oftentimes people forget about or say, I'll get to it, and never get to it. So here's an opportunity to get some assistance for that through the Employee Assistance Program. There are some online legal services available, and that would be through the website. You can take a look at some things that are there that can certainly assist you. An issue that we're dealing with more and more is identity theft. It happens every day. When I was doing the presentation here a couple weeks ago, there were, I think, a couple identity breaches that were made known, and one was at a popular restaurant chain where people had, if they had used their credit card, it was compromised, and it happens all too frequently. And for those people who are victims of it, it can be extremely, extremely stressful, extremely challenging, and can take sometimes years to try and resolve. So there are some certainly solutions and precautions that they can advise you to take to try and prevent identity theft through this particular benefit. And then family budgeting and financial planning. Oftentimes when I meet with couples, I ask them who does the budgeting, and they'll look at me and say, what budget? We live paycheck to paycheck, but I think everybody needs a budget. Everybody needs to plan for various phases of their life and the life cycle. And so therefore, this particular benefit can help with that. And the other response I get is, well, my husband or wife does it. Well, how often do you sit down and talk about it or reassess it and visit it at various stages? And it's often the case that they don't. So I highly encourage people to revisit it and look at it at various periods in your life. Regardless of sort of what phase in the life cycle you're at, very important, and different goals at different stages of the life cycle. So very important to take a look at that. Along with that, savings and investment strategies. So saving for if you have a particular goal in mind, how are you going to save for that, whether it be a trip, whether it be purchasing a home, whether it be if you're toward the middle part of the life cycle, what are you going to do in retirement, and are you going to purchase a second home, sell that home, where are you going to live? All those kinds of things are important to take a look at. So I think when the market sort of tanked, about 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of people revisited their investment strategies and decided, well, what do I need to do differently and to help protect my investments? So important to do that prior to things like that occurring. And then also looking at which credit card to pay off first. So they can help with that. Some credit cards carry much higher interest rates than others. And so they can help take a look at, along with budgeting, really which credit card to pay off, but also what's the wise use of credit. Determining the amount needed to retire comfortably. So very, very important. For some of us in this room, we will and should not rely totally on Social Security, but some of us will be able to access that. But for some other people in this room, given your ages, you probably may not and probably won't be able to access Social Security, because in terms of, they're talking about the solvency of it, and I forget how solvent it is at this point, at what point, but you hear different projections. So I strongly advise people to take a look at what is their retirement plan, and how can you save for retirement, because you can't rely on Social Security. So, and some people won't be able to look at it at all or use it at all. So, and then it can also help identify a financial planner locally who has certifications in those respective areas, and how they can assist you with your goals and your plans with your family or as an individual. Group services. There are group services available through the Employee Assistance Program. Critical incident support for employees affected by disasters or critical incidents. Those would be things like the untimely death of a coworker, let's say an unfortunate accident on the job that might injure a number of people, or in worst case scenarios, significant disasters, as what happened with 9/11. Many of us were deployed to various work sites to help people deal with the tragedies of that. So, and then some people, just by continuously watching the events unfold on TV, were traumatically affected by it. So that's one of the services that EAPs provide, group services, and then also grief groups for work sites affected by the death of an employee. I've done those, did some about a month ago for a department that in a hospital that had, unfortunately, I think 2 or 3 untimely deaths within a matter of a couple weeks of employees just kind of at work one day, going home, and then they don't come in the next day. They found them dead at home, unfortunately. So those things happen. It's unfortunate, but we have to be prepared to deal with it. Orientations to the EAP, such as we're doing today, and I did several weeks ago for supervisors and managers. That's part of the group services provided through the Employee Assistance Program. And then there's also health and wellness presentations. And those are a variety of different topics. It could be from stress management, to balancing work and family, resilience, really a whole gamut of issues. I've done so many of them over the years, but there's all kind of topics out there that you can choose from and take a look at. And I think, Heather, don't you have a list of some of the topics, and you were surveying some people. Is that on your list today, too?
Yes. Yes, on the back of the evaluation forms, there's a list of future potential EAP presentation topics. So if everyone would take a moment to look through those, that would help us back in the Labor Management Forum to come up with future offerings.
Okay. So yeah, you'll see the list there, and there's quite a few. And then you can help decide, Heather, and decide which ones that would be most important to you. And then somebody would, such as myself, would come on site and provide the training. Is there anybody? Looks like the folks in the back may not have a. Do you? Oh, okay. Thank you. And this is these are the various ways in which you can access the Employee Assistance Program 24/7. There is a toll-free number for people that are hearing impaired. There's a separate toll-free number for them. And there's a person answers live. You're not going to receive voicemail or a call menu. And then the EAP representative will be there to certainly help you obtain the needed resources. And if you do want to meet with a counselor, typically the way they do it is they will get your zip code, and then they'll refer you to somebody that is within a certain radius of your home within that zip code, and to make sure that it is certainly accessible to you. So, and then if public transportation is an issue, as is sometimes with people, they'll make sure that that particular counselor is on a public transportation route, so which is important for some folks. So they will look at that as well and want to make sure that there are the least number of obstacles possible to that person getting the appropriate assistance. And then the website, I don't know how many of you have ever accessed the website? Okay. There's really a wealth of resources there. Legal issues, financial information, wellness, as well as life management articles. There's even an online EAP orientation. There's some information on stress management and change management seminars. There's some webinars and podcasts and, interactive tools around a variety of different issues. So the website has a wealth of information as well. So I would encourage you, if you haven't visited the website, to take a look at it and see what kind of tools are there that might assist you, what kind of articles and so forth that are there for your benefit as well as your family's benefit. And I want to emphasize the EAP is available to family members as well, and also for dependent children. It is a program that's available to them, so that's important to keep in mind. It is prepaid, so for the EAP sessions, there are no charges for those if they're provided to you or a family member that's eligible for the services. Should somebody be referred to a resource, an outside resource, the counselor will let the individual know up front what portion of their insurance or health care costs might cover those. And counselors typically can contact the insurance company on their behalf even while they're in the session and determine what that might be. They can even look on the website for them. Most insurance companies nowadays, you can access that information online, and you can get to see what any kind of copays there might be. And then, there are The ways to contact the EAP, again, we encourage people the earlier the better. The earlier they identify a problem and seek help, then that prevents them from experiencing it getting worse or experiencing a lot of undue stress and hardship in the meantime. So we do encourage people to contact the EAP for assistance. Any questions, concerns that individuals have? Nobody has questions? Anybody from the other sites? Yes, sir.
So, if you're currently involved in...
Is it turned on?
If you're currently involved in an EAP provided benefit, are you limited to that one, or can you do multiples at once?
Good question. Well, let's say somebody comes to somebody for assistance with a particular problem, and they get up to the 6 sessions. And let's say 3 months down the road, another issue develops that might be totally different. Then they can certainly come back to us and request the assistance. They're not going to be denied that particular benefit. In some cases, it may be multiple individuals within the same family getting assistance at the same time. And as long as they're eligible, then each person would be able to, let's say if it's identified that maybe a child needs to see a counselor separately, aside from the parents, then they could get the benefit. And then if the parents then need to meet with a counselor together for concerns that they have, then certainly they would be able to get that benefit.
Does that restriction also apply to the web resources that you have listed here?
Web resources are unlimited, so anytime you go and access the website or interact with a podcast or download something like that, those are always there. There's no limit to the number of times you might be able to access that. There is as far as the legal advice, the telephonic is unlimited. People do get the one in-person legal consultation. And then if people need further legal consultation, then often there are special fees or reduced fees that the individual can get with a specified attorney or attorneys that are on that provider network or in that provider network.
So basically the 6 weeks is 6 weeks per year, person, 6 sessions per person per...
It's typically 6 sessions per problem occurrence per year.
Per problem occurrence per year. So if you have 2 different kinds of problems, you can have 2 different sessions.
If they occur at different times, correct.
I see.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
For the retirement planning, okay, retirement planning. Are the people that we would be referred to, are they familiar with the retirement plans, the CSRS and the FERS?
As far as they're familiar with here, that I don't know, but they certainly could become part of a retirement planning process is to get familiar with what particular benefits that an individual has for retirement, whether it be a 401k, a TDA, or something of that nature. And so there's so many retirement plans out there, it may be difficult for them to know everything with everybody in every company, but part of their job is to certainly get familiar with the plan that you have, and they probably would ask some information and ask you to provide some documents to really get a good look at it and say, okay, this is what the fund you're investing in, and this is the rate you're getting, and that sort of thing. So, some of them out there are available, are nationally known. For example, in education, they tend to use a specific company. In healthcare and education tend to use specific companies across the country. They're fairly well known, and the name escapes me as far as that particular group. But And some of them exist in private and as well as public agencies, some of those retirement options and investment funds and so forth. So the key, I think, for an investment planner is really knowing how aggressive it is, where the distributions are. Is it more conservative versus aggressive? Where do you want to go? What are you comfortable with as far as your degree of risk? So they would certainly become familiar with those funds if they already aren't, to really guide you appropriately. But yeah, good question. Any other questions? That's correct, yeah. Yeah, the in-person, I'm sorry, go ahead. Was that the full question? Yeah, the in-person financial planning would have a fee, but over the phone would not. Sure. They would actually, there is some information on the website about it, and they could give some basic information over the phone. But if somebody decides they want to proceed with preparing a will, then you would be referred to an attorney that is in the network, and that attorney would sit down and begin to prepare the process with you. I remember that when I prepared my wife and I many years ago, it was sort of like a two-step process. We went in, explained our needs, and then they prepared it. We went and reviewed it to make sure it was what we had, it really contained our desires and what we had expressed to the attorney. And so we reviewed it, and then it was finalized. It could be I suspect a single-step, multiple-step process. I would think it would probably be a multiple-step process, because first is going in and identifying really what your wishes and desires are, and then the attorney writing up and preparing the will. So that would be the process, is to get referral to actually meet with an attorney in person. Correct. And there are fees, apparently special fees they've negotiated with attorneys to provide that service. Another good question. More questions? Do you have one? Any other questions? And maybe other people. Okay.
You mentioned sandwich generation.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of employees now that are dealing with elder care issues.
Sure.
If the parent of an employee is a dependent, would they also be eligible for these services, or is that only available to children of the employees?
So if they are a dependent, legal dependent, they're eligible for services.
Okay.
Yeah. And typically that's looked at via, I guess, for tax purposes, whether that person is considered legal dependent, whether you can claim them. So for income tax purposes. So yeah. And definitely. If they're a legal dependent, they would be eligible for the EAP services. Good question. Any other questions? All good questions. If you think of something later, you can always feel free to certainly call the toll-free number, and they could answer the question for you. And sometimes those questions arise later, and you think, oh, I wish I would ask that, or that didn't cross my mind at the time. But feel free to call the toll-free number. Again, they're there 24/7. You'll get a live person. Yes, it is rare, where you have to go through such a, I guess, frustrating, complex phone menu that you was like, oh, you just want to sort of sometimes give up. But no, there is somebody there live. I've actually called the number a couple times, and somebody does answer. So I've never actually got a voicemail when I've called. So, but yeah, in this day and age of phone trees and menus, it's and then sometimes you get recycled back into the beginning, and it's so. But which is tough, because when you think about, let's say you have an elderly parent, and they're dealing with that. I mean, you can imagine the frustration they experience. And I remember when my mother, she's 87, and she was shopping for a cable provider, and they were explaining all these benefits to her, and I actually had to go there and be there a day that she could talk to somebody, and I talked to the person on speakerphone with her, because it had to be, since she was a subscriber, she had to be there, but I was able to interpret and translate some things for her, because, I mean, I don't know how many of you have dealt with a cable company, but, it can make your head spin in terms of the packages and what's available, and, and then, of course, they, their job is to sell the service, and they're going to sell as many things as they want. And my 87-year-old mother isn't interested in NFL Sunday. Although she is a diehard Steelers fan. She does not miss a Steelers game. So anyway, but she's not going to be concerned about the other teams, just who the Steelers are playing. So, but you can imagine the frustration that those people experience if we get frustration. So yeah, I can see people needing certainly assistance with those kinds of things. Any other questions, concerns? Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for your questions. And again, if you think of any questions, feel free to call the toll-free number. Have a good day.